New York State Senate is set to vote this week on a bill that would allow undocumented immigrants to apply for driver's licenses.
Similar legislation has already been implemented in 12 states. New York's Green Light bill passed the Democratic-controlled Assembly, 87-61 last week. Democrats also controlled the state Senate, and Governor Andrew Cuomo says that he will sign this bill if it passes. So Wall Street Journal reporter Jimmy Vielkind is in Albany, New York. He's going to talk a little bit more about this. So what led New York lawmakers to consider legislation like this?
Well, Anne-Marie, this comes after a concerted push that started years ago, but really gained steam this legislative session, the one that began in 2019, when Democrats took control of the state Senate majority. For years, Republicans had held sway in the state's upper chamber, and many progressive priorities, including the driver's license measure, had been blocked from coming to a floor vote. What we hear from the bill's sponsor and other advocates is that that changes this week. It's a contentious issue, but one that should be finally getting a floor vote and could be signed into law as soon as this month.
So what would the ability to apply for a driver's license mean for undocumented immigrants in the state?
Well, advocates of the measure say that it's a simple question of fairness, especially in upstate areas around farms where many undocumented immigrants are working. A driver's license is necessary to get to work, to take children to school, to get to medical appointments, to do the things that people need to do to conduct their ordinary lives. In the age of Donald Trump, where the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency has been aggressive in its deportation, being pulled over and operating a vehicle without a license could be grounds for an arrest, which could eventually lead to deportation. Immigrant advocates say that they're living in fear and that legalizing a process for them to get driver's license will remove a barrier for deportation and reduce stress. Now, opponents of the measure fear that this will lead to undocumented immigrants being able to vote. In New York, the way the databases are set up, the opponents say there will be very little stopping someone who has a driver's license number from getting onto the voter rolls. Opponents, including many Republicans in the New York State Senate and State Assembly, also say that it's a bad idea to give privileges to non-citizens, as they believe it will reduce the incentive for immigrants to follow the processes of legal immigration into the country.
So then what does New York and New York State get out of this? 'Cause I'm sort of thinking it through, and, I suppose it gives them a better snapshot of who actually is in their state. Is it about something more than that?
Well, the Fiscal Policy Institute, a labor-backed think tank, estimates about 265,000 New Yorkers will avail themselves of this. New Yorkers as a whole, it is said by proponents of the measure, will benefit because there will be fewer people, unlicensed drivers on the roads, and studies have shown that could reduce the number of hit-and-run accidents. There will be more revenue coming into the state as undocumented immigrants, some of whom are already driving, pay driver's license fees. And the argument is that this will improve public safety, making sure that everyone who is on the road has some level of insurance and has some level of training.
So other states, 12 in fact, have laws in place for illegal immigrants to obtain driver's licenses, including nearby Connecticut. What has been the effect there since Connecticut implemented the law back in 2015? It'll be interesting to see, given there's some history for some other states.
Well, advocates have pointed out that the sky has not fallen in other states. It's been one of their refrains, and especially because, as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is fond of saying, New York is a progressive capital and has traditionally been at the vanguard of social policy issues. So in some ways, proponents of this bill say it's a natural step, and they've criticized the Empire State for not moving more quickly on this issue. And in this debate, and we've seen that public opinion shows that a majority of New Yorkers are not in favor of this measure, and the support numbers are particularly low in upstate areas, and they're particularly soft in suburban areas outside of New York City. So advocates of this measure are hoping that this will help New York to once again move forward. But again, opponents are seizing on it and saying that there will be political consequences in those suburban areas, which were key to Democrats gaining control of the state Senate in the last election.
Did you get a chance to, in these other states that have similar laws for undocumented immigrants, look at compliance rates? Because I would think that would be a concern for undocumented immigrants, that now, it's on file. We've got your name, your picture, your address.
Well, that's been a concern here in New York, too. And this morning, Governor Cuomo has been on the radio talking about how he wants to make sure that there's not some database maintained by the state that essentially has the names of undocumented immigrants who have applied for a driver's license. So that is an ongoing concern. The governor said he would have the state attorney general review the practice and review the law. The bill's sponsors say that they believe the legislation has been crafted so that that information cannot be turned over. And we know that in New York City, where a municipal ID card was established, the ID NYC, this was also a concern and also an issue and led to New York City destroying data when it was requested under a challenge.
All right, Jimmy Vielkind, thank you so much. Really interesting reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.